tired. I'm tired.
The Late Morning Program with Nam Ras Podcast.
Hare Krishna, everyone. You are listening to the number one Hare Krishna podcast in the world. My name is Nam Ras Das. I'm your host, and I'm here with Sankirtana Prabhu from New Vrindavan. Sankirtana Prabhu, thank you for joining me.
My great pleasure. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yes, so I've seen Sankirtana Prabhu my whole life, practically going to New Vrindavan and for Krishna camp and hearing his storytelling. And he's been a long-time member of the New Vrindavan community. We'll hear all about it, on the podcast. But let's start with how you got in contact with Krishna Consciousness. But actually, before that even, where did you grow up? And tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Well, I was born in Germany, and I came to America with my parents at the age of 5. I grew up in New York City. I was thrust into the public school in kindergarten, and so I didn't speak a word of English. And it was a very traumatic experience for me, because I grew up in a little village in Germany, not more than like 50 houses altogether. And I wandered around the streets, and I was totally free. And then I came to New York, and all of a sudden there's this, all of these stipulations and regulations. Even then, there was a lot of crime and disturbance in New York City, and there was always some apprehension about being out too late at night, or traveling the subways. But one of the things that I was fortunate about, actually, my mother and father, they were very liberal, and they accepted whatever I did, practically speaking. But one of the things that was a great benefit in my life is I lived in a neighborhood in Upper New York City, not too far from the George Washington Bridge, where my neighborhood was full of diversity. I had friends who were Puerto Ricans and Spanish and whites and blacks. There was a whole spectrum of kids that I grew up with. And so I was, looking back, I was very grateful to have that experience with that type of diversity and at a young age.
Right.
And so I was open to a lot of different things. When I got into high school, I was already looking into like Buddhism. I was looking into creativity. One of the big problems, of course, is when I got here, I didn't speak a word of English. So for me, communication became a very critical issue in my life. How to express myself, how to communicate properly. And I was dangerously shy when I was a kid, but I started dabbling in different things to express myself. I bought paint supplies and was dabbling in art, and then I got into poetry. And by the time I got to college, I kind of grabbed the bull by the horn, so to speak, and I jumped into theater, getting in front of an audience, although that was one of the big issues in my life. And so when I got to college, I was majoring in history with the idea of being a teacher. But
same with me. I have a history degree.
Oh, great. Well, I switched, and I eventually majored in theater and also filmmaking.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So when did you get in touch with devotees, and where did that happen?
Well, as a young man, I was around 19 or 20. I moved down to the East Village. Not far. This is in like I started going to the East Village probably in 66 and 67. I moved down there and had a couple of my friends as roommates. We lived in an area in the village called Alphabet City.
Right, Alphabet City, yeah.
There's Second Avenue, First Avenue, and then Avenue A, B, C, and D. So I live in Alphabet City by Avenue C on Second Street. And a friend of mine in college, she said, there's this new group. They opened up a center near you. Why don't you just drop in and find out and see if you can get me some literature on them? She was talking about the Hare Krishna people at 26 Second Avenue. And so I think I went there. It was probably in early 1968. And so I wasn't interested myself, but I got some literatures and some information for my friend, and I passed it along to her.
You went there just to get some literature for someone else. But little did you know that later on you'd dedicate your whole life to this.
Right. And then about a year later, I was, like I said, I was taking theater courses and film courses. And for one of my film courses, the teacher requested everybody to do a short documentary. So I thought, well, these Hare Krishna people, they look pretty photogenic. Let me do something on them. And so I went back down to 26 Second Avenue. I still lived in the neighborhood, but to my surprise, I found that the store was closed. And they had moved just a couple of blocks away at 61 Second Avenue.
Right.
They were there for just a couple of years. And I started going there. My wife, we met in college, and she was majoring in sociology. So she thought, let me go with you, and I'll do a little paper for my sociology course on what type of people join the Hare Krishnas. So we were just both going and interviewing the devotees, and I was following them around with a camera. The archives, Yadobar actually said that he saw my footage. I never completed the documentary. I took about maybe 20 minutes worth of footage or 30 minutes worth of footage. But just playing the footage itself, people were so fascinated. The teacher gave me flying colors, even though I never really got around to editing it.
Wow.
But Yadobar said that it's hard to use that stuff. This is back in the 60s, and it's all kind of cinema verite, as they say. All of these strange angles of the devotees looking up at them, and, at these weird angles. Right. And very often, when I follow them on Sankirtana to Fifth Avenue and on St. Mark's Place in the East Village, very often I was filming the crowd. I was filming people walking by and getting reaction shots. Right. And on Fifth Avenue and even on St. Mark's Place, the reactions were really, the people were taken aback by seeing them. Wow. I think the very first time I saw them, actually, it was in 1967. This is even before I went to 26 Second Avenue. There was a very first Easter be-in Central Park in New York City. And I saw the devotees were there, and they were chanting. And so I thought to myself, on one hand, I was like repulsed because of the strange way they looked. But on the other hand, I was attracted because who sings and dances in the street? That's kind of a very attractive thing. Yeah. To see people singing in the street and dancing in the street. Everybody would love to do that. There's Fred Astaire, and who's that guy that was doing that film on Singing in the Rain? Right. I get his name offhand. But those are very attractive features, that people would be free enough and uninhibited enough to go to do that, actually. And I always considered myself, even before the hippies came along in the early 60s, I considered myself like a nonconformist. And even as a hippie, there's a lot of things that I didn't like about the whole hippie mentality and the mindset. And I was even not really told out to the whole hippie paradigm.
Right.
There were kind of 4 types of hippies, actually. There was like the political hippies, the back to land hippies, the stoned out drug hippies that were just drugged out all the time. And then I was like an artsy hippie. I was involved in theater and writing poetry, stuff like that. So I really felt I didn't really fit in to the whole hippie scene.
So then when did you get actually involved with the Hare Krishna movement?
You know, I've never been a joiner. Like I said, I was always a nonconformist, and
Right.
I hated organizations. And my wife and I, when we came upon the devotees, she was actually, we weren't married at the time, but she was more interested in a sense. I appreciated their spirituality, but I was no way going to join some organization.
Yeah.
And so she was, she was talking about maybe we should join or something, just a brief conversation. After we graduated from college, then we left New York City. This is in 1970, and we moved up to Nova Scotia on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean in the forest. So we had rented an old farmhouse with another couple, and we were up there for, at that time, it was the worst winter in the last 80 years. We experienced that up in Nova Scotia.
Wow. And then when did you meet? So you didn't join. You didn't want to join, but you did ultimately did join, right?
Yes. One thing I'd like to touch upon is some of the things that like moved me in the direction of joining. One of the things when we got up to Nova Scotia, the fellow that we rented the house with had to go back to New York City. And then he came back with a brand new album put out by George Harrison, the All Things Must Pass, My Sweet Lord,
Right.
the My Sweet Lord album. And so we were taken aback. Wow, even George Harrison is into the Krishnas. We had gotten a Bhagavad Gita from the devotees before we left. And so we were not every day, but, that was part of our reading material up in Nova Scotia. And then we were hearing the My Sweet Lord album. And then one of the things that struck me before we left New York City, when I was still interviewing the devotees, I was at 26 Second Avenue interviewing one of the devotees with my wife. And then there's another devotee that came in. And he had just come from Boston. And when they saw each other, they immediately fell flat on the floor and offered obeisances to each other. And they jumped up and they gave them each other a hearty embrace. That act impressed me much more than the philosophy. I thought, here are 2 people are so connected. When they see each other, they fall flat on the ground to offer their respects to one another, and then they give themselves a hearty embrace together. So that was really a remarkable thing. And, I have to say, I'm not kind of too philosophical, at least at that point.
Yeah.
But that really made an impact on me.
Wow.
And
That's
then,
really interesting. I really like that you share that, because sometimes, people become attracted to Krishna consciousness in really kind of different ways. It's not really mostly about philosophy. It's like about care and respect and love of the devotees and how they behave with each other. That's really impressive. I love that.
so we also love the prasadam. That was a big plus. And then before I left New York City, one of the devotees, he said, just chant Hare Krishna. Get the prayer beads. At that time, you couldn't get prayer beads from the devotees. You had to go to a hobby shop and buy beads and make your own prayer beads.
Right.
So after we were up in Nova Scotia for many months, we actually were compelled to go to the a hobby shop, and we made our own prayer beads, my wife and I. And eventually we left Nova Scotia. I was invited by a theater company in Madison, Wisconsin. I think it's still there. It's called the Broome Street Theater. And I was contacting around, and they offered me a place in the theater company. And so my wife and I, we went hitching down through Canada, and we, unknowing to us, but Prabhupada wound up in Detroit. When on our way there, we heard that Prabhupada was going to be in Detroit. And so
Really? What year was this?
This is in 1971 of
Okay.
July. So we had met the devotees, like I said, in 68, and then this is about 2 or 3 years later, and there's a funny story that I have to share.
Please.
Because we stopped at the Toronto temple, and they told us, wow, Prabhupada is going to be in Detroit in just a few days. Why don't you wait and you can come with us to see Prabhupada? And we were going in that direction anyways. We had to go through Detroit. We had to go through Chicago to get to Madison, Wisconsin. And so we waited, and there was a car leaving Friday night. And so we heard about it, and we got our backpacks. We had backpacks. We were hitching. We hitched all over the place in those days. It wasn't too much of a problem. And so we got down to the car, and the car was full. And we were kind of, despondent. And so they said, don't worry about a thing. There's another car leaving on Saturday morning. This is Friday evening. There's another car leaving Saturday morning. Just go with them, and you'll get there in time to see Prabhupada. And so, okay, the next morning we came down again with our backpacks. Car was full.
Oh, no.
We had been waiting around now for 3 days because the devotees invited us that they would take us to Detroit. But in a sense, sometimes that happens, that, people make promises that they can't keep, or maybe they made a promise in a very kind of haphazard way. But anyways, they were enthusiastic for us to see Prabhupada, but they couldn't facilitate us. And we were totally despondent. And the driver said, okay, get into the car, squeeze in. We squeezed in with our knapsacks, and we was just, squished against the door. And he said, I'm going to drop you off on the highway. You've been hitchhiking through Canada all this time anyways. So, it's only 4-hour drive. You'll be there in no time. Of course, when you're hitchhiking, sometimes you're waiting around for like hours to get a ride, which happened to us at times. So we're out on the highway. We're dropped off. The devotees continue on their way. And we're wondering, what the heck are we going to do now? We actually want to go to Detroit. And we got out the map, and we're looking around, and we see up above the lakes, Lake Michigan or Lake Superior, there were these like exotic towns, Sault Ste. Marie in Canada, and Thunder Bay. And so we were looking, and we were imagining, wow, let's hitchhike up there. That would be a tremendous experience. And so as we're contemplating on what to do next, then I don't know, I think it was my wife, one of us came up with the idea, wait a minute, this is some sort of a test to see how determined we are to see Srila Prabhupada, to get his darshan. This is a test. And so, yeah, we said yes. We agreed that it was a test. We decided to go to Detroit. And when we stuck out our thumbs on the highway, the very first car that passed by came to a screeching halt. He got on and he said he's going to Detroit.
Oh my goodness. And so you went to Detroit and you saw Prabhupada there?
Yes, this is in July of 1971. We
Wow.
had the good fortune to see Prabhupada. And this is another instance of not only getting Prabhupada's darshan and seeing a pure devotee in action, but also when we got there, there's another moment where that brought us closer to Krishna consciousness. And that was when we got there, the devotees were in a frenzy. You know, in the old days when Prabhupada was coming to the temple, everybody was running around and doing things, cleaning, scrubbing floors, painting walls, whatever. The whole atmosphere was just super hyper. And so we came into this atmosphere where the devotees are running around and everybody's just totally absorbed. But one of the devotees, his name was Govardhan. He was the vice president of the temple. He actually stopped and greeted us and sat us down and took the time to bring us prasadam.
Wow.
And we were struck with just the graciousness of this devotee, because we knew we had been around devotees long enough where we knew how important Srila Prabhupada was and how important it was to prepare for Prabhupada's arrival. We understood that perfectly.
Yeah.
And we were struck with this devotee taking time out to get ready for Prabhupada's arrival to tend to us. And so, again, this act was heaps and heaps of way more important than anything anybody could share with us, according to the philosophy.
Right. That's a great second example. I mean, if devotees stop and greet people and be personal, that really can affect someone like it did to you.
No, it's a personal philosophy. It's all about. Prabhupada even mentioned, actually, if there's a pujari on the altar, and if someone comes in, the pujari could stop serving the deity and tend to the guest.
Yes.
This is how important. Even I think Prabhupada at one point stopped a lecture when he saw two people that were about to leave, and he said, get them some prasadam before they leave.
Right.
And so this is the nature of the Hare Krishna movement. This is what it's all about. You know, the philosophy is there, but it's all about how we behave, how we relate to one another, and how we relate to people in general.
Yeah.
People are watching. People are watching us. We're always like, on stage, so to speak. People are watching how we behave.
Yes.
And so anyways, we continued on. And by this time, like I said, we had gotten, we went to a hobby shop a couple of months before and made the japa beads. And in 1971 was really a momentous time for us. We got married in April of 1971. Around that same time, we started chanting. So this is the 50th anniversary of our marriage, of our chanting, accepting japa as our meditation, and of meeting Srila Prabhupada.
50 years ago. Wow.
1971.
Amazing.
And so we continued. The next day, we heard Prabhupada when he arrived, and then we heard the next morning his talk. But we were kind of eager to get underway and just finally get someplace where we could settle down. And so we got to Madison, Wisconsin, and settled down there. And a few months later, this couple showed up with the intention of starting a temple there.
Oh, wow.
So far, we hadn't formally joined the Hare Krishnas, even at this point, after 3 years. Right now, I was full-fledged involved with this theater company in Madison for at least another year. And then we finally decided. Satsarupa came to visit us at one point with a few devotees, including Ganesham, Bhakti Tirtha Swami.
Library party.
No, well, I had invited them up, especially. I got some programs together for them. This is in like 1972. I got some programs together and invited them up and they stayed with us for several days. We were very Bhakti Tirtha Ganesham was always so blissful, always so happy. We to be around, we weren't around devotees for any length of time, but here we had devotees staying with us in our apartment for 3 or 4 days, and it was very enlivening. And we had decided to join. We were going to join the Chicago Temple. One of the reasons why we decided to join, really, it wasn't because of any of the preaching that the devotees did to us. What it was, since we didn't have devotee association, there was this couple came for maybe 6 months. And they stayed there, and they were making devotees, and I don't know, they didn't think it was productive enough, and they left. They closed down the temple, and then we were there, and we continued with the Sunday feast, and people were coming to our apartment. We were chanting, talking about Krishna consciousness, continuing with the Sunday feast. And for ourselves, we had no association. So every Sunday morning, we listened to a Christian radio station broadcast out of Minneapolis. And one Sunday morning, it was a pretty liberal station. And one Sunday morning, they had a couple on. And the couple was telling about their experiences, that they had a nice house in Minneapolis. They had just returned from a mission in Africa. They were in Africa for like a year or two. They had just come back, and they were being interviewed. And they were saying how enlivened they were, and they had given up their house. They sold their possessions, and they involved themselves full-time in the ministry. And as we were listening to this interview, my wife and I both realized, wow, this couple made such a commitment to their faith.
Right.
And we're holding back. We were very impressed with the way this couple conducted themselves in the interview and the stories they shared. And from that, listening to that interview, that's what pushed us. We have to make, this couple made such a tremendous change in their lives, such a tremendous commitment. We have to make a similar commitment.
Wow.
What we believe in. And so sometimes when I meet with Christians, I tell them actually it was because of some Christian the ministers that I wound up as a Hare Krishna.
It's interesting how we can find inspiration in the most unlikely places, that you found inspiration that kind of pushed you forward over that little hump that might have been there. But this came not from devotees. It came, well, not, devotees of Krishna, but devotees of God in the Christian faith. So very cool to hear that.
And I believed early on that I saw the need for the movement to make bridges.
Right.
And so we were associating with the Chicago devotees. We went down to the temple a couple of times. They had come up. One of the groups that had came up was Satsrupa Maharaj. But when we had our our son, he was born in Madison, Wisconsin in 1972. And so I felt that there needed to be a connection between the East and the West. And so we named our son Joshua Sanjaya. So we named from the Bible and from the Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, right.
So the devotees were kind of, they were a little bit upset and disappointed. Joshua Sanjaya. So, but I had a firm belief that we needed to make connections and to build bridges between the East and the West.
And so then when did you, so what happened, where were you kind of practicing? You were practicing in Madison, Wisconsin for a number of years before you went to
2.5 years.
Yeah, tell us what happened there.
Well, then like I said, after this, in 1973, our son was born in 72. And then in 73, Satsrupa, I think, visited us either at the end of 72 or the beginning of 73. But then we finally decided to make that move. And we joined the temple in Chicago. Actually, they were gracious enough. A few of the devotees lived outside, some families, and they paid for the rent for the families that were involved in full-time service to the temple. So I think there were maybe 4 or 5 families that were living within a block or two of the temple. And at 74 and 75, Prabhupada also visited Chicago. And we had, very good fortune to see him there. But by 76, we had our daughter was born in 75, and we were very leery about bringing our children up in a big city. And we were also very leery because our daughter was 1 year old and our son was 3. We were very leery about the idea of sending them away to some ashram, the Gurukula. We called up Jagadish in Dallas at the time. That was the main and the only. Well, there was another school in New Vrindavan. So that was our choice, to go to Dallas or to go to New Vrindavan. Because we weren't going to send the kids away without us being close by to supervise them. We didn't have that much faith, so to speak.
I was just going to say that. I mean, a lot of other devotees were doing the exact opposite. They're like, all in, like send all the kids and we're going to go on Sankirtana and do the whole thing.
We were too attached. But anyways, at that time, we decided to move to New Vrindavan. And we knew New Vrindavan was a very austere place. Yeah. We understood. And we also heard that whatever you do, at the time of Gaur Purnim, or even at the time of Nityananda's appearance day, if you initiate something on those days, it'll fructify in success. So we knew that we needed all the mercy we could get. And so, first of all, we got permission from the temple president, who gave us permission to leave and to go to New Vrindavan. And then we were. We packed up all of our stuff. We were leaving in a few days, and I sent most of our stuff in boxes ahead on the bus. I didn't want to carry all those boxes and schlep those around. So we got everything together, took them down to the bus station, and they went via the bus, Greyhound bus. And we're going to pick up, in a week or two later, we would be picking up those things in the bus station in Wheeling, West Virginia. So when I got back from dropping my stuff off and shipping it out to West Virginia, the president says, I just heard on the radio that New Vrindavan has been quarantined. And I thought he was joking.
Really?
But this was national news for some reason, that New Vrindavan was under quarantine. No one could come in, no one could leave. It was under quarantine. And so this, I thought first he was just kidding. But I listened to the radio, and sure enough, it came up a couple of times. This news, I don't know, it seemed to be newsworthy to some people. So it was being broadcast several times throughout the day. So we were in a dilemma, but we thought we're going to go anyways. And even though we had two young kids, and in a sense we were foolhardy enough to go through with the move.
Yeah, yeah.
And we came in. It was a hepatitis.
Oh, this is the first time I'm hearing about this.
Okay, but this is in 1976 in March. So our whole idea was, let's get the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and arrive there on his appearance day.
Yeah.
And so we were like locked into that. Otherwise, if we postponed the trip, we wouldn't get the mercy of Chaitanya. That was that's the way we thought. And so we got there in Pittsburgh, and one old time devotee, Bhokta, he passed away some years back, but Bhokta picked us up at the station, and we waited until the dead of night. And there's two entrances into New Vrindavan. One, the main entrance is on 250, coming in from Wheeling on 250,
yeah,
going into New Vrindavan. And that entrance was guarded by the police day and night. But the other entrance, which was an old country dirt road, a winding dirt road that practically took forever to get here, Bhokta brought us up that direction in the dead of night. And as we were driving up and up further through the foliage, it was the trees, and the ambiance was unbelievable. And as we were getting closer and closer, the energy in the vehicle, the van, was kind of surcharged. The energy was like kind of bouncing off the walls, and all of us were just chanting on our japa beads in the dead of night, making our way up to New Vrindavan. And so that was on the eve of Gaur Purnim, and the next day we attended Mangal Arti. And then the quarantine was still in effect, but just at that time, we were thinking that we were going to get a huge feast for Gaur Purnim. At least we'd have that.
right.
But they had just spoken to an Ayurvedic doctor, and he told them that if you want to wipe this out completely, this hepatitis, then everyone has to go on a mung fast, a mung water, not even a mung soup. You boil the mung beans, and then you only consume the water. You don't consume the beans.
Right.
You leave them in the pot. So this was a diet that we imposed for 7 days. Mung water, 2 or 3 times a day. Couldn't get any Mahaprasadam or anything. And so we survived that. And we lived in a little, what is called a Prabhupada house, which is a little house that Prabhupada designed. It's a one-room house with no electricity and no running water, and they moved us into that house. So we were there with 2 kids, and this area, I still live, I only live across the street from where we first moved to in New Vrindavan 45 years ago, to that little Prabhupada house. There were 4 or 5 of them, but they all dilapidated. They disappeared because of disuse.
Right.
But Prabhupada was very excited, and he said that everyone, they should build 1,000 of these little Prabhupada houses. He made a little design, but it never took off. It never went any place. So anyways, we've been here in New Vrindavan all these years, since 1976. And fortunately, Prabhupada visited, his last visit to New Vrindavan was in 1976. And I'm very fortunate. Again, I have unlimited amounts of blessings and fortune, because my wife and I, over 20 years now, we are living in the house that Prabhupada used the last time he was here, and he gave darshan on our front lawn every evening for 10 days, 9 or 10 days. This was in June of 1976. Actually, it's about the same time of year, 45 years ago, in 1976. And so we had the good fortune to see Srila Prabhupada, and here he spoke for small groups on the front lawn, and the devotees were all assigned a day or two to come up to the front lawn. So there wasn't a huge crowd around Prabhupada. It was a very intimate atmosphere. And when I was, the day that I attended the evening darshan, Prabhupada was talking about the Bhagavad Gita, and he was saying that we should present the Bhagavad Gita in the business places and in the factories. And one devotee raised his hand. He said, well, Prabhupada, why would the businesses and the companies and the factories let us come in to preach about Bhagavad Gita?
Yeah.
So Prabhupada said that, tell them that if they study the Bhagavad Gita and they begin to apply it in their lives, their work will improve.
Wow.
So this is like a motivational seminar. Well, Prabhupada was suggesting, and the motivational seminars didn't really pick up until the 80s and 90s. That was when the motivational seminars were in full swing. Companies were inviting people in. But here, Prabhupada in the 70s, he was already suggesting a motivational seminar based on the principles of Bhagavad Gita.
He wasn't saying go in there and preach to them about Krishna consciousness or chant, you could chant this mantra or anything like. He said, if you read this, your work will improve. That's very broad-minded.
Yes, Prabhupada was tremendously broad-minded, and I have a bit of a peeve with the devotees, because they, what Prabhupada wrote, and the recordings of Prabhupada, and the letters and the conversations, they constitute millions and millions of words.
Yeah.
So nowadays, it seems that devotees are picking and choosing.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
They have their quotes of Prabhupada that supports their particular paradigm.
Yes.
Supports their particular agenda. But Prabhupada actually, he made so many contradictory statements that just like, for instance, with the dress, Prabhupada made so many statements about the normal dress, dress of a gentleman.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine.
Yes.
And then he also made statements about the transcendental attire of, so devotees are bickering back and forth. Let them just do, everyone can take things of Prabhupada and present it in their own way, in their own initiative. One of Prabhupada's famous or favorite statements was, "Go in like a needle." So we have to find our own needle. For some people, that needle may be the Republican Party. Some people, the devotees are all gung-ho about the Republican Party. Other people, their needle may be Black Lives Matter, or their needle may be the Democratic Party.
Right.
My particular needle was theater and storytelling. And so, in a sense, we each have to find our own needle. And this, after being in New Vrindavan, I came from the city temple in Chicago.
Can I ask you a question before you go into that? You're saying about, I like that point you made about everyone needs to find their needle. But if I could play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
What if that needle that you're using can be misrepresenting the philosophy of Krishna consciousness?
That's very important.
Like, for example, a certain political party or certain political movement.
That's why Prabhupada, I just recently read that Prabhupada said that the devotees can engage in different activities, but their intention is not to get carried away by these different activities.
Right.
Their intention is to present Krishna consciousness. That's
I see.
their intention. And Bhakti Tirtha, back years and years ago, he also said something, because we were talking about building bridges to, this is the idea of what type of bridges can we create to bring people closer. And he made one very important point. He says, yes, you want to build a bridge, but you want to make sure when people come across that bridge, they're coming to Krishna consciousness.
Wow, that's such a great point.
Yeah.
Build the bridge, but then when people come back, make sure they're coming to Krishna consciousness.
Yeah. Because
that is fantastic.
We may lose that intention.
Yeah, of course.
I know people have tried to build bridges and they lose that intention. They lose the goal of the purpose of the bridge, and they get carried away and they're swept away and they're gone from the movement.
I think it's a matter of someone's Krishna consciousness as well. Like, how deeply have they imbibed the philosophy and the practice themselves, and then they're able to kind of like, interact with others according to where those people are and meet them there. But then also, giving their association, not always taking that and then absorbing it into them, changing something, but actually using that as a bridge to bring people back to Krishna consciousness. I love that point.
No, like yoga could be a bridge. The devotees are setting up yoga classes in temples, and that's a very viable bridge. But devotees can't get carried away and think that yoga is more important than the Krishna consciousness.
Sure.
Devotees can't get carried away and think that the Republican doctrine is more important than the Krishna consciousness.
Right.
Devotees can't get carried away, but we can all find our own needles. And if we are intent enough, we have to be pretty grounded. And like I mentioned, I wanted to mention that after spending a couple of years here in New Vrindavan, because in Chicago, I was going out to the airport distributing books. I was going downtown Chicago. I made a vow for some months. I would take a case of Bhagavad Gita, 100 Bhagavad Gitas, downtown Chicago, and distribute them every day. So I was doing that regularly for months. Or I didn't like going out to the airport. I did go out to the airport and distributed books at the O'Hara airport. but I'd like to meet like just the common people.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my forte, getting in touch with the common everyday people, not the people in the upper echelons that can afford a book for $10 or, I just want to get in touch with the regular common people, so to speak.
Mhm. And so then when did you, so you've been staying in New Vrindavan for the past 45 years. Tell us a little bit about how that's been. I mean, New Vrindavan has gone through so many different phases,
Yeah.
some kind of crazy phases. And then,
Well,
now.
let me finish my other point because I forgot.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I'll lead into what you're talking about. Uh, After a couple of years in New Vrindavan, I realized that to go into Krishna consciousness for the long haul,
Yeah.
you really needed to find your own needle. And I was involved before I got in Krishna consciousness. I was involved in theater and I was really connected with that. In a sense, that was like a spiritual element in my life, a part of my spiritual path. And so I had once we joined the temple in Chicago, I rejected that. And here in New Vrindavan, I was thinking, what am I really going to get into? And I was thinking about maybe I'll learn stained glass, or maybe I'll learn something. I'll work with the. At one point, I was working with the milk and making cheese, and I was trying to get different books out to see how I could, what type of cheeses I can make. But I wasn't very good with my hands. I just fell on my face miserably. But then I realized, wait a minute, I do have something I'm connected with,
Yeah.
my theater. And so I started a theater effort here in New Vrindavan. And to begin that, after the Palace of Gold opened, I went to New York City and worked with the players there. That's that thing behind me. I joined the players in their performance of the Ramayan. This is on 55th Street and off of 8th Avenue at the temple.
Wow.
They had, besides having a theater, they had a theater on the 3rd floor. They had a gift shop. They had a temple. They had a vegetarian restaurant in the basement. And we performed 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday,
Yeah.
the Ramayan. And I went there to get trained up with the devotees there and see how to present plays and still maintain your Krishna consciousness at the same time.
Wow.
So I made there was Nanda Kishore and Lokamangala, some of the early thespians of the Vaikuntha Players, and Lokamangala and I hit it off. But unfortunately, they sold out the New York Temple. They sold it.
Right.
This is
55th Street.
a 12-story building that they purchased, and Prabhupada was so pleased. And when he came there, he told them never to sell this place. And they had the mentality of like traveling Sankirtan. That they had a problem with the elevators. The elevators weren't functioning properly. Very often, the devotees had to sprint up to the 8th or 9th or 10th floor, wherever they were living. And so rather than getting the elevators fixed properly, because it did cost a lot of money, they just sold out the building.
Mm.
And part of that money went to Prabhupada's samadhi in Vrindavan.
Right.
And so that was the justification. We're going to help fund Prabhupada's samadhi. And when I was visiting in New York, working with the players, the Vaikuntha Players, I was there in the room when the temple authorities were unfolding this plan. And I
Really?
thought to myself, this is a big, big mistake.
Did you say anything? I mean, that must have been like, how
No,
could you, right?
I didn't say a word.
Right.
The idea is, Prabhupada always says that if you put together a bundle of sticks, then they'll be very strong. But if you separate the sticks, then they can break very easily. So it was years after they sold that building. It was years and years before they actually got their footing again.
Yeah.
They've and so they're there now. They have several places. The Bhakti Center, and they have the temple in Brooklyn, and I think 26 Second Avenue is still functioning, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Good. I'm glad. I haven't been in New York for over 20 years now.
You haven't been back?
Well, I used to go back periodically on a regular basis in the 80s and 90s, but now I've done a lot of traveling, and that's one of the things that I did, getting back to about New Vrindavan,
Yes.
the whole, what
Wait,
happened.
before we go into New Vrindavan, I want to talk a little bit about Prabhupada really appreciated theater. And he said a number of things that this philosophy and the stories and everything can really be expressed very nicely and in a very palatable way to people, to like the public, with theater. So I know the Vaikuntha Players and they all did at Rath Yatras, they did dramas and things like that. Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean,
Yes. And because very fortunately, I had the association of Lokamangala for many years.
yeah.
We collaborated. He moved here to New Vrindavan. We collaborated on a number of things. And our magnum opus that we collaborated on was a two-man drama of the Mahabharata that we took back to New York in 1987. We rented a theater in Midtown Manhattan. But he constantly, Loka was explaining to me how Prabhupada was so supportive of the theater. A lot of devotees poo-pooed the theater people.
Really?
They thought they were taking up too much time rehearsing it, because to present something properly, to present something effectively, you really have to put in the time to rehearse and connect with the lines of the script and connect with the person that you're playing. And Lokamangala taught me that, and he explained a lot of things that Prabhupada had said. One of the things that somehow or other the theater devotees found themselves in California, in Los Angeles, for some time in the mid 70s, and so Prabhupada actually he invited the theater company at that time to come to Mayapur to perform.
Right, I heard that.
It was about 15 people in the theater company, and he paid their way. Prabhupada personally sponsored their trip to Mayapur to come and perform for the festival. This is how committed Prabhupada was. Other devotees, they kind of like thought it was good. Sometimes when Prabhupada came to see a play, there was a famous, I think, photograph of Prabhupada watching a play in New York. He was watching the play. Everybody was watching Prabhupada. They wanted to see how Prabhupada would react.
Yes.
And during one scene, Lokamangala played Ravana. He was a fantastic Ravana. He's famous as Ravana. And in one scene, the kidnapping scene, and Sita, of course, is a devotee, a woman devotee. And in one scene, to kidnap Sita, he physically picked her up and threw her over his shoulder and absconded with her. And there were devotees, there were sannyasis in the audience, and they were cringing. They were thinking, Lokamangala is a brahmachari. How can a brahmachari ever think to grab hold of a devotee like that, a female devotee like that? But Prabhupada didn't miss a beat. Prabhupada was totally absorbed in the play, and he was like exclaiming, "What a rascal this Ravana is to abscond with Sita!"
Oh
And
my
so,
gosh.
Prabhupada was totally absorbed in the play, not
Wow.
even thinking about male or female contact between devotees. And
Wow.
so this is the liberal, the far-reaching nature of Srila Prabhupada.
Beautiful. Brings tears to my eyes. Wow. Amazing story. Wow. Oh my goodness.
Prabhupada had written a letter in the early days of the theater company, the Vaikuntha Players, and he said, I saw, this was in India, he was expressing his experience. He said, I saw two men on a bare stage, and they were playing a Shakespeare, and everyone was applauding. So Lokamangala and I took that quote from Prabhupada, and we made that into kind of a reality, because we were going to perform the Mahabharata in New York City. I had heard, this was in 1987. At the end of 1986, I had heard that Peter Brook, who's an internationally famous director, a theater director,
right.
he got together in France a 9-hour drama of Mahabharata. And he
Right.
was taking that all over the world. It was an international cast. And so I had heard that they were coming to America. They were coming first to the West Coast. And then at the end of 1987, they were going to spend 3 months in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Academy of Music performing. And so I thought, well, if he's going to be there, we're going to be there at the same time. Of course, we couldn't afford to rent a theater for 3 months. It was like $1,000 a week. And in 1987, that was steep money.
Yeah.
And so, of course, nowadays it would be much more expensive. But we rented a theater for 6 weeks, and we performed Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And people were coming. There was even a couple of people that came from the Peter Brook production to see. And we even got an article in the New York Times.
Really?
Yeah, and the article said they referred to us as the other Mahabharata. There was Peter Brook's Mahabharata, and then there was the other Mahabharata, and people were coming. And it also mentioned that we were disciples of His Divine Grace.
Right, right.
And so Lokamangala and I, when we were developing the play, we were looking for other people that would join us.
Yeah.
We couldn't find anybody to make that type of a commitment. We rehearsed for like 5 or 6 months, and then we were performing in New York for 6 weeks. And after that, we were going to tour with it and take it on the road to colleges and other places. We actually toured with the Mahabharata for 4 years. And so no one wanted to make that type of a commitment.
Yeah.
So we rewrote the Mahabharata, and we rewrote it for 2 actors, Lokamangala and myself. He played 6 roles. He played Yudhisthira, he played Krishna, he played Drona, and he played Dhritarashtra, the blind king, several other characters. He played, I played Vidura and Shakuni. No, he played Shakuni. So I played Duryodhan, Vidura, and Arjun. And he played 6 other characters.
Wow.
And so we were both storytellers and actors, assuming different roles. It was like, I was into the nature of using storytelling on the stage.
Right.
And so we rewrote the play. And then one night after the New York Times review came out, we would go into the lobby after the performance, and as people were leaving, we would thank them for coming. And one person, actually, who was a drama student at Columbia College, and he said, I've seen you people around chanting on the streets, and whenever I see you people, I always cross the street and avoid you. I try to avoid you like anything. But now you've made me come to see you, and I even have paid $10 to get in.
Wow.
And he invited us to, he wanted to interview us for his drama studies and his paper that he was working on. And so he said, you guys are building he used the word bridge. We didn't come up with use it, but he said, you're building a bridge. And so that was our intention. And another person that came, that we met in the lobby, and I'm friends with him still to this day, was a Jewish author and storyteller. And he said that he's into the mystical Jewish tradition, the Hasidim. And he said that he studied Prabhupada and Chaitanya because he felt there was that mystical kind of experience in the Hasidim was also being delivered by Prabhupada and Chaitanya. He was very conversant with the Chaitanya and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so this is in 1987. And he told us that when I saw the review and I read that you were disciples of Srila Prabhupada, I realized that you're the real Mahabharata and Peter Brooks is the shadow Mahabharata.
Wow.
You guys are performing the real Mahabharata. And so we had experiences like this all the time, that people were overwhelmed
Sure.
with seeing the performance.
Wow.
But later on, Lokamangala, of course, there were things going on here in New Vrindavan that he didn't agree with. He left in New Vrindavan in 1990. One of the last performances that we did together was for the Himalayan Institute, Swami Rama, their ashram in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. And there was a big event that was going on there, and they invited us to perform there. A few months earlier, we even performed for Chinmayananda. There's some, maybe you know him. He used to be into the athletics. He was encouraged his devotee. I don't know if his name was Chinmayananda. I forget it, but he has a community in Queens of people.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever come across.
No, I haven't.
I forget. His name is not exactly Chinmayananda, but he also, when we performed for his group in Queens, there were about 400 or 500 people in the audience. All of them were his students and disciples. After the play was over, he came on stage and he started glorifying Srila Prabhupada.
Wow.
He's saying Prabhupada is all of our guru. All of us, we are the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And he's telling this to his 400 disciples of the power and the importance of Prabhupada's mission in America. And so these are the type of reactions that we were getting like all the time from people.
That was your needle. That's
right. That's what was our needle.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about New Vrindavan, because I made a kind of a diversion to what Prabhupada said about theater, but let's talk about New Vrindavan. I mean, like I said, there was kind of some weird things going on at that time, and how did you navigate all that?
Well, it was like a roller coaster ride. At first, Kirtananda had kind of endeared himself to Lokamangala and he gave us full reign. of what we wanted to do or where we wanted to travel. We were gone for several months out of the year, like in New York. We also spent a month or two in Philadelphia. Even we were still being invited to even temples. So there was, we were still connected. We were the thread that was still connecting the residents and the rascals in New Vrindavan to the rest of the ISKCON movement. So there was one. I don't know if it was one of the New Age soothsayers. He made the comments about you deposit money in a bank account, and then there's so much money in the account, and you begin to withdraw the account, and so that was happening. Kirtananda actually, he had the blessings and the goodwill of Prabhupada and everybody in the entire Hare Krishna movement.
Right.
And then gradually he began to change things. Mm-hmm. And so the trust, the account was there, but when you start changing things, you're using up that trust that you built up, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I didn't mind it. And actually, some of the things that he was doing, he was trying to make interfaith connections.
Sure.
And then that was at the beginning of my Krishna consciousness. That was what I was all about, making those connections. Like I mentioned, I named my son Joshua Sanjaya. And I was even, before I even joined in Chicago, I was visiting churches and talking with rabbis and other people in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So I was very connected to interfaith. And I appreciated that he was making these interfaith connections. But unfortunately, at the same time, he was changing. Yeah. Things here in New Vrindavan, wearing the dhotis and to wearing the robes, chanting a Hare Krishna. He was Krishnaizing many Christian songs. Like there's one famous song, "Onward Christian Soldiers," right? So now they're singing at the temple, "Onward Krishna's Soldiers." Right. So he grew up in a very fundamentalist background, Christian background. His father was a preacher. But what happened is that Kirtananda in 1980, I think it was in 87 as well, or maybe 80, it could be 86. He was smashed over the head with a lead bar by some disgruntled Hare Krishna devotee who was just here for a short time. Right. Kirtananda wound up in the hospital. He was unconscious in coma for a month. Then when he came out of coma, he had some physical rehabilitation, but he had no mental rehabilitation. And that's what is necessary, both physical and utilizing the mind again. Later, we found out that usually with people with that type of trauma, they resort back to their younger years. And so Kirtananda was resorting back in his various tendencies, whatever they may be, back to his younger life. And I could, at some point, for me, the bank account was withdrawn.
Right.
But
fully withdrawn.
But fortunately, both my wife and I, we both had solid services that we were absorbed in. And myself was my theater work.
Yeah.
My wife was a teacher here in the academic teacher for the school. We had about 100 school-age children and 10 teachers at the time, and a full functioning school that was acknowledged by the state of West Virginia. So we were both fortunate that we both had, like, because there were even senior Prabhupada disciples here in New Vrindavan that in one sense were sold out to Kirtananda. And once in a while, somebody would approach us and ask us about, if you can't see eye to eye with Kirtananda, what are you doing here?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that.
And I said, this is my home. And this is Prabhupada's project. Because at one time, at one time he declared himself that he is the founder Acharya of New Vrindavan. And that was just like the last straw. Although I'm not like a radical person, I've always considered myself, like in the British term, what they use, the loyal opposition. So I don't want to see Kirtananda burnt to the ground. I wanted the best for him.
Right.
He did far more service for Srila Prabhupada than I could ever do.
Yes.
He built this New Vrindavan. He inspired the devotees here, without a doubt. But,
right.
Enough is enough. There has to be a parting of the, the road is parting. But anyways, we didn't know how, but we felt that New Vrindavan was going to survive and change. There was Kirtananda was the main guy here, and Krishna got him out of the way. No one else could do it. Krishna got him out of the way. He went back to jail, and he spent 8 years in jail. There was a fraction of devotees who were staunchly Kirtananda people, and also the Prabhupada people, and there was a court. We were friends, actually. We were brothers, but we couldn't see eye to eye. And there was, in the morning, there was an hour or so dedicated to the Kirtananda vision of the morning service. And then there was an hour or so dedicated to the Prabhupada vision of the morning service.
Right.
So things went on in a very cordial way because the devotees still respected each other. So this is another thing that I see, that especially if you look on Facebook and social media, the devotees are at each other's back,
For the littlest things.
right. And it's an awful thing to see.
Yeah.
The public is looking at how we behave amongst ourselves and amongst each other. This is the preaching. How do you honor other Vaishnavas, even though you may not agree with them? How can you honor other Vaishnavas? That's the most important preaching that we can do today.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, thanks for saying that. I do definitely agree. We do see a lot of online devotees at each other's throats, and for very little reasons, much more smaller reasons than what you're talking about, being in New Vrindavan and doing a program for the Christian kind of program and the Prabhupada program, but doing it together and having mutual respect is really interesting. So when there was like a mass exodus of devotees leaving New Vrindavan, you just thought, this is my place, and this is Prabhupada's place, and I'm going to stick around. Were there others like you? I mean,
oh yeah,
are you one of the one of the longest standing members there since the beginning, right?
No, there are other people here that are still here from, earlier than I came to New Vrindavan in 76, although I joined in 73.
Yeah.
I've been a resident of New Vrindavan, but there are devotees. Varshana Maharaj, he arrived in 72. There are so many other wonderful devotees here
Right.
who have kept the flame going for many, many years,
Amazing.
since the early and mid 70s.
That really fascinates me because the way young people work now is like, or just I guess my generation also, it's like when we don't like something or something isn't comfortable or to our liking, I already said that, we just move on. We like go somewhere else. Like when things get tough, we just move somewhere else. I mean, I still want to get inside your mind a little bit about why. I mean, is it your personality, or is it your wife's personality too, to just like
I
stick
think
to that?
I'm a stubborn person,
Right, okay.
and just as stubborn as I was to join, then I'm just as stubborn to stay.
Yeah, I see, okay.
I was kind of stubborn. It took me 3 years to actually join the Hare Krishna, but I'm just as stubborn once I, you got to be stubborn. You got to
Yeah.
have a vision for yourself. That's why I was thinking we came to New Vrindavan because we knew it wasn't going to be easy. That's why we looked for Chaitanya's mercy by coming to New Vrindavan on Chaitanya's appearance day. Get Chaitanya's blessings, to get the blessings of the Parampara, to get the blessings of the Vaishnavas. I didn't feel part of New Vrindavan for several years, actually. In those days, it was very cliquish of coming to New Vrindavan. But the thing is that one of the one of the things, I think I lost my track of thought. But anyways, it's important not to, make the mad elephant a fence. Don't attack. Don't become critical of people who don't agree with you, or maybe they've done something that you don't particularly care for. Like the devotees, like I said, in 1971 in Toronto, they promised us a ride to Detroit, and they didn't fulfill that promise. But my wife and I, the last thing we wanted to do, it didn't even cross our minds. Oh, the devotees, look at this. They broke their promise. What type of people are these? So, we have a nature, both my wife and I, and one of the reasons why our marriage is working, and it's because we want to look for solutions. We're not looking to criticize others. We're not
Point fingers.
Right. We're looking, how can we, what's the solution to the problem?
Yeah.
Not we want to expound and condemn somebody and just build upon the problem.
Yeah.
That's what's happening nowadays.
Yeah.
People are basically they're creating the mad elephant offense. They're criticizing devotees, and Prabhupada said you need to respect everyone. You can respect even an ant. Respect that. So that's something that my wife and I, we're very leery of being critical. I have that tendency myself, and my wife always gets on my case. Look at and
Wow.
she catches me. She confesses me about that.
It's cool that you mentioned her. I want to kind of segue into this next topic about you've been married for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
What an accomplishment. I mean, that in itself speaks so much about you and your wife. I mean, please impart some. I mean, I've been married 8 years now, and I feel like it's 50. I feel like it's 50 years, sort of. But if you could kind of tell us, how did you do it? How did you do that for so long, and what kind of lessons have you learned on the way?
It's not that we agreed all the time.
Of course.
It was, there was rough spots, but the thing we always told each other, listen, we're intelligent people. If there's some problem, we can figure it out. We're intelligent people. Let's figure it out. Most people, like you said, if they find something discomfortable in a relationship, they'll drop it and move on.
Right.
But we're in a sense, we're problem solvers. We want to know, how can we work things out to make this work, to make it a win-win situation. And so we've come to, over the years, to see our marriage as a partnership. We're partners. And one thing that's very good is that, like I mentioned earlier, I have a very strong connection to my own service in Krishna Consciousness. And she has she's been teaching here in New Vrindavan for over 40 years with the kids. She's preparing for her, her beginning of the student, the classrooms in September. She's already thinking about.
She's still teaching there.
Yes, she's teaching.
Amazing.
So she's been teaching for over 40 years.
Wow.
And so
we should mention her name just to honor her.
Ruchi
Devidasi. Thank you.
And we met in college.
You met in college.
And we got involved in this journey together. And
Right.
so it's been a journey, and it's been bumps in the road. But the thing is that it has to be based on partnership and on mutual respect. And also the ability to support one another.
Yes.
She supports me in my work. I'm supporting her in her work. When her classes begin, she has to leave pretty early in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm making breakfast for her, and I also make lunch for her.
Oh, that's wow.
4 days a week. I'm making breakfast and lunch, and sometimes I'm also making dinner, because in the evening, very often, she's preparing for the next day. So I appreciate, I marvel at her commitment, and I marvel at her approach to her teaching and her service.
Right.
I'm just in awe of it. And
No.
she respects and is committed to supporting my work as well. So we're very fortunate that we each have our own particular services that we are totally connected with.
I'm really glad that that we're talking about this, because there are some devotees like yourselves who are like hitting gems in our movement. We always see certain devotees, and we're kind of in the public eye, but devotees like yourselves are not in the public eye, and to come on the podcast and to hear your story and to talk about this has been really amazing, and I commend you for such a long, successful marriage. I really, really appreciate it. I mean, another question comes is like, when some young devotees, husbands, have come to me kind of and asked me like, okay, initially there's that attraction to your wife, and then when that wears off, what do you do? So what would you say to that? I mean, being married to the same person for 50 years, how would you approach that?
Well, she tells me, and I also feel the same way. She tells me she's finding out about things about me that she's never known before. And sometimes I'm mentioning stuff about my past that I've never mentioned before. And so I think the other day I was talking to somebody, and I was mentioning them. My first inklings of spiritual life was when I was a teenager. I would stay up late and watch the Steve Allen show. This was the forerunner of, like, I forget, all of these late night shows.
Okay.
Steve Allen back in the 50s and early 60s,
Yeah.
He was the first one, the late night guy, Steve Allen.
Mm.
And one night he had a Buddhist monk on. And I thought, wow, a Buddhist monk. And I was enthralled by what he said about meditation and about detachment.
Yeah.
And I started to meditate, based on just what this Buddhist monk shared on the Steve Allen show very briefly for like 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
My wife said, I've never heard that story. Why? You've never told me that.
Oh my goodness. Like you would think at 50 years of being married, you hear everything about the other person.
And so, we respect one another.
Yeah.
And
That seems to be a big theme that you're talking about.
It's not like for me, I'm the type of person that if I find something like something, I'm just going to stick with it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to, it's not that I'm complacent or lazy, but, I'm the type of, in my nature, this is the Leo, they make commitments. They make lifelong commitments. So, but it doesn't matter what, what your stars are. It's the matter of your mindset, making that connection and making what is the intention. This is all. Krishna consciousness is what is your intention. Prabhupada never said to change your service. Prabhupada says to change the intention of your service.
Right.
What is the intention? If I may, I'd like to bring up one point respectfully, because you had a person on a month back or so. He was talking about the vaccination. Sitapati, I think, was that?
Sitapati, yes.
Right. And I honor him. I respect him, but I don't agree with him.
Right. That's
So
fine, yeah.
the thing is that I immediately saw that he is a Kshatriya. His whole demeanor and the way he spoke, that vibration, that Kshatriya vibration was pouring off of him.
Right.
And so he's saying that I don't want my guru telling me that I should wear a seatbelt, right? That was one.
That was,
but that may be the mood of a Kshatriya, because in our culture, the different orders, they're different moods.
right.
An example of this in Mahabharata. The Mahabharata, Yudhishthira loses the dice match. The Pandavas and Draupadi, they are thrown out of the kingdom and they're residing in the forest. And so, the Pandavas, they don't agree on everything all the time. When they're in the forest, their first experience, they don't want to be like, especially Draupadi and Bhima, they're totally getting down on Yudhishthira for getting them into this mess.
Right.
And Draupadi wants her husbands to go back and behave like Kshatriyas and reclaim the kingdom.
Yes.
And Bhima is the same way. But Yudhishthira is saying, well, Shanti, peace. We've made a mistake, but let's be patient. Let's not respond so radically. And so Bhima is telling him, you're talking like a Brahmin. We're not Brahmins, we're Kshatriyas.
Right.
So there are these different moods in society. So Sitapati, that's the mood of a Kshatriya. I'm not coming from that mood. So my mood is a little different. If my spiritual master tells me to drive safely and to wear a seatbelt, I think, wow, that's very endearing. My spiritual master is not only concerned about my spiritual well-being, but he's concerned about my material health and well-being at the same time.
I see what you're saying.
For me, that's very endearing.
Mm.
But for somebody who's a Kshatriya mindset, they dismiss that. They don't want to hear the spiritual master giving them instructions about, so seemingly mundane activities.
Right.
So we have to, there has to be that nuanced understanding of Krishna consciousness. We're a society. There has to be a nuanced understanding. People come along and they make these blanket statements and judgments. That's okay. But, the whole idea is to be a nuance. Prabhupada established a Brahminical culture first. You see? He didn't, and at the end, in the last few months, he said, now you establish the Varnashram system. He told the leading devotees, the Brahmins, that he had created a head. Now we have to establish the rest of the Varnashram system. And one of those things, is influencing the leaders. People don't know what leaders are. People don't know how to, they have no conception of what a leader's supposed to do or how a leader's supposed to act.
Yeah.
And therefore, all of these strange people, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, are showing up on the scene. But a real leader, this is Arjuna in the Mahabharata. And I try to make, in my preaching, I try to make Krishna consciousness relevant through the Mahabharata. Because the Mahabharata is presenting the dharma in a historic way, through the stories of the Pandavas and through the history of the dynasty, the Kuru dynasty. So, hang on for a second.
Content 60.
That's okay.
My wife has it, but this is the point.
Sure.
So, the idea is that you have to make, or we as a society have to make Krishna consciousness relevant. And one of the relevant is, learning from history, and also learning from the history of Mahabharata and the Ramayana. That's history. And so people always say we have to learn from history or we're condemned to repeat those same mistakes. So one of the things is that the Pandavas, they didn't agree upon everything. They had their own little spats, but they never broke the bond between them. So as Vaishnavas, we may have our little spats, but that is insignificant in the greater picture of how to fulfill Prabhupada's mission, how to establish the Varnashram system.
I really appreciate that point, and I personally do feel like that as well. But there's also the point, Prabhu, I want you to comment on that. Okay, we can disagree on things, but what happens when we feel like the movement has really kind of went off course from what Prabhupada had originally intended to? And you can speak on this the best because you were there in the beginning of the movement, and now you're here in 2021 with us all, like, still here.
Well, I experienced it personally in the Kirtananda administration.
Yeah, like that's in a microcosmic way, but now in like a more macrocosmic way, as far as ISKCON as a movement, would you feel like do you feel that somehow that Prabhupada's movement has moved away from what his original goals or original example was?
You know what? The movement, it's definitely changing. Yeah. But is it changing for the better or for the worse?
Right.
The thing is this: in the 60s and 70s, people didn't have the freedom to make different choices like they do today.
Yeah, it's too many choices now.
Yeah, you couldn't. The paradigm was such that you couldn't be a devotee or you couldn't get initiated unless you joined the temple. You had to live in the temple. You had to serve full time at the temple to be considered for initiation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not the paradigm today. And I think we've grown as a society and a culture because now people are taking the initiative. And one other great step in moving forward in visiting shortly before we joined, we visited one temple. It was a little center, and nobody was there. The doors were open. I came in, and I was reading something on the bill, what is it, the bulletin board. There was a letter by Prabhupada, and I was amazed at this letter. It was really remarkable. This is in like 1972, probably. Prabhupada, somebody had written to Prabhupada and asking about, well, I'm in this one temple, but I'd really like to go to another temple. You know, I don't feel right here. I don't feel comfortable in this temple. So Prabhupada wrote back saying, you have to decide if you want to go to another temple, will that be in the best interest of your Krishna consciousness? If you decide it is, then by all means, go to the other temple. And so I was struck that here, you know, the devotees, they've only been in the movement for 2 or 3 years at the most.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada, the way the movement grew so quickly is that Prabhupada empowered people. He empowered people to go out and start centers or make these decisions. Like he's in the letter, he's explaining, you have to decide what is in the best interest of your Krishna consciousness. And I was like blown away by this letter and Prabhupada giving somebody that choice rather than dictating. Oh, stay here, you go here, you go there. And so Prabhupada did that constantly with people. Prabhupada, there were contradictions in Prabhupada's instructions. He would tell one person that he should go to college, and he would tell another person, no, don't go to college, it's a waste of time. So,
Right.
you know, so Prabhupada was full of contradictions. And so now we're also, you know, in one sense, devotees are still coming, they're still being inspired.
Yeah.
You know, there may be problems, but the thing is to be patient. If there are problems, we can't demand that Krishna resolve these problems right away. They require our patience. So to be patient, to see Krishna's hand in things and how things are moving along, and also not to, you know, for the most part, here in New Vrindavan, I was silent at the different changes. Actually, when these changes started happening, I wrote Kirtananda several letters, mildly suggesting what's going on, what's happening. He never responded to my letters. And if devotees came up and challenged me, then I would tell them, listen, I'm here. This is my community. You know, I live here. It's my community. It's Prabhupada's community. So in one sense, you need to speak up. But like the Bhagavad Gita teaches us, you have to act, you have to speak. But first of all, do it in a respectful way. And second of all, you can't be detached to the results, right? Isn't that what the Bhagavad Gita tells us?
Yes. Yes.
So that's it. It's very simple, I think.
Yeah, I like what you said about seeing Krishna's hand. I think that's something that we definitely overlook. And also seeing have things improved? Yeah, I think things have improved for sure. Glad, seeing the silver lining and things is important. when we're looking at something like so huge as like a worldwide society, and how far we've come in the past 52 years now or something like that, 53. It doesn't, it wasn't built overnight. I mean, it took time and to get to where we wanted to get to. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely issues for sure, but it's the way you look at them, right?
In 50 years, ISKCON has resolved what's taken the Catholic Church thousands of years to 1,000 years to resolve.
Mm.
And as far as some of the issues, but one thing that Catholic Church that was interesting, they established these different orders. So, people have to find their, like I said, their own needle.
Yeah.
So I'm at liberty to do that with my work. I've over the years I've transitioned from theater to storytelling, and from storytelling to writing books. I have 3 books out.
That's a great segue. I wanted to talk about that.
I'm working on a couple of other books right now.
Can you kind of show? Do you have them on hand? I'd just like to see. We'd like to show them to our listeners. If you'd like to, we can also tell our listeners how to get those books as well.
Yeah, I have the book. This is my newest book, Hanuman's Quest, all about Hanuman from Valmiki's Ramayana. This is my Mahabharata, the Eternal Quest. And I basically wrote these for myself, for my own upliftment. Most of my writing, I'm challenging myself, doing the research, figuring out how to present this material in two ways. One, to present it to an audience that is familiar with the books, like a devotee audience or a Hindu audience. They're familiar with the stories. But how to present it in such a way that it's unique enough and interesting enough where they'll take a look at it again. And the second is to present it to an audience that has no experience of these stories. How do you do that? It took me, like the Mahabharata, it took me 8 years to write this book. Because And at points, I was in such a conundrum. I was thinking, how am I ever going to explain this to people that don't know, I'm not familiar with this material.
Yeah.
So a couple of times I became discouraged and stopped working on it. At one point, I stopped working on it for over a year. I couldn't go on. But like I said, I'm pretty stubborn. So I although I stopped, I still had my eye on the goal to produce a book that a general audience. There's one book, Mahabharata, that is used in many colleges. The go-to book for scholars is William Buck's book that he wrote back in the 1970s on the Ramayana and also on the Mahabharata. So the intention of my book is to write a book that is that can be used in academia, that can be studied easily, and that what I don't do as the author, I never mention once that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although I do mention that in the glossary,
right,
but not in the story. But so how I'm doing that is letting how Krishna behaves with the other personalities and what the other personalities think and say. What conclusions are they coming to? And as to who Krishna is. And so this is all historic. What blind Dhritarashtra, he came to the conclusion that Krishna was the Supreme Lord, and he was fearful for his own son, that his own son was Duryodhana was totally offensive to Krishna. and rejected Krishna's supreme authority when he came to try to plead on behalf of the Pandavas. And so there are many different examples, there are many different personalities in the Mahabharata that state who Krishna is. I don't have to do it. It's all there, right?
If
So,
someone
yeah,
if someone wants to kind of buy your books, where can they find them?
this is my website for the books, mahabharat-project.com. And then my legal name, that's I use it on my books, and it's also on my Facebook page. So if you want to contact me, if you want to go and check out my books, go to mahabharat-project.com, mahabharat/project.com. So basically, I want to present Krishna consciousness according to the history of Mahabharata, because the dharma is presented in the Mahabharata. So not only there's the mundane dharma that is applied to society, and in the Bhagavad Gita, then there's Krishna's transcendental dharma, where he says, give up all varieties of religion, surrender to me. So first you have to come to that realization. How is the dharma, how is the teachings working in society? And that's exactly what the Mahabharata does for us. Just like to give you one example.
Sure.
After Yudhisthira builds his own kingdom, Indraprastha, then Narada Muni shows up. And Narada Muni, of course, he's a brilliant personality, a transcendentalist. But Narada Muni doesn't give Yudhisthira spiritual advice. I don't know if you know this section. Narada Muni goes into what advice, very practical advice on how to rule the kingdom.
I did not know this.
Yeah, so this is all there in the Mahabharata.
Okay.
He's not giving spiritual advice. No, he's telling you to. And one of the things is kind of reflective of the Declaration of Independence, because Yudhisthira, Narada Muni tells Yudhisthira that there's three things a king needs to do, a leader, not only a king, but a leader. One of the things is to ensure the happiness of the people in his company, of the people in his kingdom, whatever type of leader you are. It's so important to get out the message of what a leader means. So anyways, he tells, make sure the people under your care are happy. But how does this happiness manifest? He says there's two things here. It manifests through justice, and it manifests through economic prosperity. That's how happiness manifests itself in the world.
Wow.
So he says you need to make sure that there's justice, and that's the problem we're having in the United States. Is the justice being evenly dispersed for everyone and anyone, right? That's going on at this very moment. Look how relevant the Mahabharata is.
Yeah, it's true.
And economic prosperity. The leaders have to make sure that everybody's engaged in their own swadharma. What is our propensity? What are our own propensities? You need to be engaged and make a livelihood according to your own propensity.
Wow.
So it's, this is very well delineated on the pages of Mahabharata. He even goes into making sure that you have a system of spies, that you have forts, outlying forts that are protecting the kingdom. He goes into some nitty-gritty detail. He even tells Yudhisthira, that Narada says that to make sure that all of your craftsmen have their pay in advance, that they have several months in advance pay. Not that people are
So detailed.
not that people are living week to week.
Yeah, paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's all there. And one other thing about a leadership that's a really remarkable is one day Arjuna is walking in the marketplaces of Indraprastha, and somebody comes running to him and saying, "My cows have been stolen in the dead of night." And Arjuna immediately jumps into action. He doesn't wait a moment. He immediately gets a bow and arrows and he jumps into action. And it's explained at that section that the leader, he's responsible to retrieve the stolen goods. And you know what? If he doesn't retrieve the stolen goods, he has to replace the stolen goods. So what leader in Washington, D.C., when the companies steal your, your kind of like your retirement money, that's happened before. Bernie Madoff goes, he steals, or the companies are stealing. There's stealing going on across the board.
Yeah, of course.
Anyways, this is the supreme responsibility of the leadership. You either retrieve the stolen goods or you have to replace the stolen goods. This is the potency of the Mahabharata, and to put the leaders, they have to see what they're responsible for.
Wow. I did not know that the Mahabharata had this kind of really detailed, instructions on leadership and all kinds of things. Wow.
Prabhupada, in the first canto, Prabhupada says that the Mahabharata is more important than the original Vedas. For the Kali Yuga, the Mahabharata is much more important than the original Vedas.
Wow. Well, Sankirtana Prabhu, it was really fascinating. We're kind of at our end here, the end of the time, but thank you so much for joining me here. It was really, really fascinating to hear your story, and you have so much wisdom to share with all of us. And I really urge our listeners to go ahead, Google his name. You can find him on Facebook too at this name on the screen. You can get in touch with him about his books. You can find his, where his books can be bought. If you Google that name, also you get in contact with him, and buy those books. Read. Yeah, you can buy them through
Prabhu's website. Mahabharata is also on Amazon as well.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Prabhu, thank you again for joining me for this.
It's my great pleasure, and I must say that I really love your show.
Oh, thank you.
One of the things about it is it doesn't avoid controversy.
Thank you so much.
We have to look at the controversy, and we have to, at the same time, be respectful and honor the Vaishnavas.
Sure.
So, that's part of our makeup, who we are. And when we act properly as Vaishnavas, that's going to be preaching for us. People are looking, in one sense, we want everybody to look at us, right? The world, in one sense, that's what New Vrindavan was built for. And the devotees were wondering, and Kirtananda himself, we want to be a beacon for the world. Yeah. But, when the world was actually looking, what did they see? Some not very pleasant things going on here in New Vrindavan.
Right.
So we have to be responsible to each other, to Srila Prabhupada, to the Vaishnava mission. Vaishnava is not a mundane religious tradition. Vaishnavas, Prabhupada explains that anybody could be a Vaishnava. In any walk of life, in any different religion, Vaishnava is a principle. That means that one who is compassionate. We want to show the world what real knowledge is, and what real relationships, real loving relationships, and especially in establishing a loving relationship with the Supreme Lord who is within our hearts. Sri Krishna. So
Jai.
that's the important thing for us to think about whenever we open our mouths, whenever we do something.
I feel that you've gained, so much of your wisdom from studying the Mahabharata really deeply, and then that kind of wisdom is coming out in when you see what's going on in our world and in our society, and you can so much to offer, Prabhu. Thank you so much and again, thank you for sharing so much about your life with all of our listeners. This is the Late Morning Program. You can find me on Facebook and YouTube. Please subscribe and please share this podcast. Sankirtana Prabhu, please stay on. I'm going to just turn off the recording. Hare Krishna, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.